taught you to hate the color of your skin? Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate? You should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you?
Most of us blacks, or Negroes as he called us, really thought we were free without being aware that in our subconscious, all those chains we thought had been struck off were still there. And there were many ways where what really motivated us was our desire to be loved by the white man. Malcolm meant to lance that sense of inferiority. He knew it would be painful. He knew that people could kill you because of it, but he dared to take that risk.
He was saying something over and above that of any other leader of that day, while the other leaders were begging for entry into the house of their oppressor. He was telling you to build your own house.
Welcome to the Gilchrist Experience. As you see, that's the old roll-in that we ran for years in the late 1990s, early 2000. But that whole idea, what Malcolm was saying, is that we lack self-esteem, and we thought little of ourselves. We were worrying about the size of our noses, our complexion, and that was in the 60s, and we haven't gone too far from that, have we? And today we've got a black president, and our youngsters are showing their drawers, and still a lack of self-esteem. And where do we go from here? I tell you one thing, the president scared me to death. I mean, I'm on pins and needles now. I just can't imagine having Romney as a president. I mean, what's happening here? Are we going back? We'll go back to those days if this man is elected.
You certainly will. And I don't know what happened to Barack Obama last week. I couldn't watch the debate. I only saw about 5 minutes of it. But the 5 minutes that I saw was horrific. This has been an ongoing problem with our president. He failed to be able to explain himself and his programs when he was presenting the health care bill. The Republicans ran roughshod for about 7 weeks before he even opened his mouth to begin to explain that, no, there weren't going to be death panels to kill grandma and all the nonsense that the Republicans were putting out. Romney, bold-faced, lied in the few minutes that I saw, and I never saw Obama challenge the lie. I never saw him check this guy.
Or look down
and stuttering and stammering. This is not presidential. It is not leading towards promoting your agenda, and it doesn't need to draw in the people who are on the edge, your independent voters. It doesn't tend to draw them in. Romney presented himself well, and it was not about telling the truth. It was just about presenting your argument. And Obama failed to check him. He failed to call him a liar. I think he's afraid to use that word, and people today are afraid to use that word. I don't know why. A liar is a person who intentionally is making a false statement.
Well, what was the congressman's name? Welch? What was his name? Joe, the guy who called out in the Congress and the State of the Union address.
Yes.
Joe something?
I know.
The guy from Massachusetts, I think.
No, he's from the South.
But there are times when we have to call.
He called the president a liar. Had no problem with.
And one of the things that I was mindful of this past week.
Brown.
Joe
Brown.
we underestimate often our opposition. And this is a story that's more than 500 years old. You know, when those of our ancestors were on the shores of Africa and they saw big ships coming over the horizon from Europe, and even when they had seen armies come invading from Spain, well, those people, you know, we treat them right, they'll learn to be civilized. That was the attitude of some of our ancestors. We underestimated our enemies. Well, we'll give them a place to stay. We'll be hospitable and we'll let them have a piece of land here that they can stay and set up a colony. You know, we'll teach them our ways and they'll become civilized. And those results, we still suffer 500 years later from underestimating our enemies, from underestimating the people who had our destruction in mind, the people who had capitalist profit, that was the greed that drove the slavists, and that's the greed that continues to drive a great many Republicans, the capitalist idea of making profit and at any cost. We have very often underestimated our opponents, and that may have been part of what we saw with Obama last week. We, as we step towards this particular election, we have to be aware of the millions of voters who've been disenfranchised by different schemes that the Republicans have come up with. We have to be aware of the millions, if not billions of dollars that are being fed by subterfuge into the campaign against Obama, because, of course, individuals are limited in what they can donate, but some of these nonprofit groups, some of these groups that say they're nonprofit, they are virtually unlimited in the millions of dollars that they can spend attacking the administration. So we have underestimated our opponents again. What we have to do now, this show as well as many of our convocations between now and voting day, has to be a call to arms for our allies to say, wake up, our enemies have been scheming and plotting, and they are very, very powerful.
All right, we know Obama's temperament. I call him a blessing from God, and I thought maybe his godliness was taking over him, and he couldn't bring it to himself to wallow in the mud with Romney.
You don't have to wallow in the mud with your adversary.
Right.
You don't get down in the mud with your adversary. Sun Tzu said, you need to know your enemy.
Right.
In the military, we do what's called an estimate of the situation, an ops order. You need to know your enemy's strengths and weaknesses, and you need to know your own.
Right.
Okay? Right. You do not stand there and try to be gentlemanly while someone is eviscerating you.
He seemed bewildered that the man could lie the way he did.
And it is not about us.
Right. Okay.
These debates are not for us. He's not a savior. He's not Jesus Christ. He's not the greatest thing since sliced bread. He's a politician who happens to be black. Now, getting beyond that, black people didn't elect him. They voted for him, but they didn't elect him.
Right.
It was the white majority of this country that moved off of that point where white people have been for 400 years.
Right.
And said, here is a black man that I believe I should vote for because he holds the same values that I have with regard to this country and with regard to the administration of government. Now, when he fails to present his agenda and looks that bad in front of a paltry adversary, he now rocks the foundation that all of these white people have stepped on to support him.
How about black people?
Well, that too, but black people can't elect a president.
Right.
There aren't enough black people in this country to elect a president. We have enclaves, you know, in the urban areas, but there aren't enough black people to elect a president. You still need the overall masses of white people in this country. And as I had said before, many white people progressed from that mindset of the 50s and 60s. And like Malcolm said, I'll work with anybody.
Right.
Anybody.
Right.
That will help tear down this corrupt and immoral system.
Right.
So there are many white people who didn't look and say, well, he's black, I'm voting for the white guy. All right? Right now, there's a congressional hearing going on with ASA, and they're trying to conspire, again, an agenda against Obama with regard to the bombing of the embassy overseas.
Yeah. Well,
so they're sitting right now,
Right.
preparing that.
Yeah.
So those whites who were willing to vote, and many young whites who might feel disenfranchised over the last 4 years, those are the ones, the people who are not solid in their thinking, can have cause to say, well, maybe I better go this way on this round. Yeah, we know who Romney is. And forget about him being a Mormon, just looking at the background and the culture he comes from.
Corporate raider.
His father was in Russia with Joseph Stalin, helping Joseph Stalin before he came back to this country to go to American Motors. So the Romneys worked hand in hand with the communist dictator Stalin in setting up the oil fields across Russia. People don't look at that, all right? They talk about Obama's mother was this, Obama's father was that, and all, he's a Muslim, he's that. Well, let's look at Romney, and let's look at the heritage of Romney. Let's look at the heritage of the Koch brothers, whose father funded the John Birch Society. Let's look at the Koch brothers who brought segregated schools back into North Carolina in 2006. Let's look at these people. Let's call them for who and what they are and stop pussyfooting around here.
One of the things that I think
Illuminati
here in New York, particularly in New York, we have a black and brown majority. And certainly, if the black, brown, and Asian voters in New York were to become more allied and more vocal, there'd be no question about who the next mayor would be. There would not be an opportunity for people outside of our community. And part of what's happening is that we have become a little bit too laid back. We are not fighting as often. We're not going to jail as often. We are not being loud and vocal as often as we need to. Those who oppose progress, those who want to make sure that the United States white minority and New York's white minority stays in power, they have been very clever and very active organizing their money, organizing their votes, disenfranchising people who look like us. They've been very strategic and very, very clever in what they've been doing. We've taken almost the attitude of, well, we had a victory, so let's kick back and chill for a while.
Yeah.
While we may be kicking back and chilling in what we saw as a victory, those who oppose the interests of black, brown, and Asian people here in New York City, as well as across the nation, they have been active. And they have their plans very, very much together. And we have to be beware of that. It's not too late for us to be active.
What do you think is going to happen then? I mean, you're telling me that... what do you think is going to happen?
I don't expect Romney to win.
Well,
but
why
however,
are black people so up in the air about Obama?
One of the things that's happening is that there are people who they recognize that Obama is less than perfect. And the fact that he's less than perfect in his presidency.
They plotted since day one to make sure he didn't do anything.
They engaged, let's look at this.
Conspiracy.
This was not only conspiracy, it was treasonous.
Okay.
It was a plan by elected officials of the United States government to work against the leader of the free world.
There's something
treasonous, all right? And let's call it for what it is.
Doesn't Obama have a case?
It was treasonous.
But how many battlefronts can we fight on at one time?
Well, we get him reelected first, then we can put everybody in jail.
That's part of what we have to do. And for New York, it's particularly because in New York we have the Democratic majority. I don't think there's much question that New York is going to be voting solidly for Obama, the Democratic majority. We, however, have to talk to our friends and relatives that we may have in Illinois, in Iowa, in other places, and Florida. We have to talk to our friends and allies in those places to make sure that they come out and that they understand their votes will be deciding. The 200 or 300 votes that was fought over in Florida when Gore was going up for the presidency, we have to talk to our people in Florida and let them know 200 or 300 votes can make a difference. The allies and friends that we have outside New York.
What about them stealing the election?
Well, you're not going to have that issue with them changing the voting rights across the country. 30-some-odd states came up with, you got to have photo ID.
But a lot of that's been blocked.
It's been blocked in some
cases.
but not all. And you got to remember.
And even when it's blocked, because we had it right here in New York,
So
where walking distance from where we sit, we had poll watchers who were asking people for ID, which was not part of the law in New York State.
Right.
So that even where it's illegal, there are people who will be intimidated and people who will break the law and will not necessarily obey the national mandate.
I'll tell you what really scares me. You know, during the debate, I was away on vacation, so I watched it on a different channel than I normally watch MSNBC. And it was scary. The way the synopsis, the commentation and everything else. I mean, it was scary how they swayed towards Romney. I mean, it was ridiculous.
He has
they made
friends in high
Obama
places.
look like a clown.
Well, we have to remember, television is a medium. It's a medium that is designed to control the way in which the population thinks.
Exactly.
And when people fail to think for themselves, when people fail to read across the board, when people fail to research and dig and find out the truth, they will fall victim, will always be the victim. So people need to understand. You remember, well, Abraham Lincoln said years ago, he who experiences and cannot learn from his experience is a fool. And we got a lot of fools walking around here.
All over the
All right?
We have to
got a
challenge
lot
our
of fools.
people.
Now,
We challenge our viewers to move beyond
They
foolishness.
can't
you
challenge
have,
themselves.
you saw, we had a black mayor years ago. He was a one-term mayor. I said to him the night he was elected, we were sitting in the hotel room before he came down to the ballroom. I said, Your Honor, you need to do an estimate of the situation. You need to do a fiscal analysis of where New York City is now, because they're not leaving you anything to work with. Nothing.
He was handed a busted budget, and then
Nothing.
he was blamed for the busted budget.
Barack Obama, he's given the helm of the Titanic as it's going down.
Exactly.
And you have people that think that in 3.5 or 4 years, we should be where we were 10 years ago.
30, 40 million lost jobs.
Ignorant
He's
in
the
their
man who's
thinking,
supposed to solve that problem.
But he's supposed to turn the ship around, all right? Now, if the people who feel so shaken by the lack of progress, but they haven't looked at the legislative record of this man, if the people who feel so shaken can be convinced not to vote or to boycott, and that word is a stupid word when it comes to an election. Anybody that's talking about that needs to be...
That's handing power to your
they need to have their
adversaries.
tongue pulled out.
Let's go over
but
this.
if the people do not do what they should do, they will wind up just how they wound up with Giuliani here in New York.
Right after Dinkins.
How about the fact that the stock market during the 2008, and when Obama was elected, was at 6,000. All right? The stock market, Dow Jones is at 13,000.
It's doubled.
today. And we're
And the
not
profits-
better off than we were 4 years
Some
ago?
folks are better off. Most of them don't look like us.
Well, the
The
rich
stock
people
market
are
has
better.
nothing to do with the
some
general
folks are-
We
population.
know everybody else is making money.
Yes.
Corporations had their best year in history.
Well, it's
The year
back
before.
where it was. It's back where it was corporately. But for the people working, there are no
Well,
pay raises.
how could anybody like Romney say we're not better off?
Because
When he's
it's-
making money
it
hand
suits
over
his cause
fist.
to please poverty and to claim that he in some way speaks for the average person. And there are
But
people
that's a
who are
joke.
gullible enough, but there are people who are gullible enough to believe that he speaks for the average person.
But everybody knows he's lying.
Not everybody knows this. There are people who look like you and I, who believe him when he says we're going to make things better, and he's talking about making things better
Just
for his
because Obama
1%.
looked down a couple of times, well, a lot.
Well, the
He
media
looked-
contributes by emphasizing
All
Obama's
right, what
flaws.
about the fact somebody said to me, somebody must have threatened his family?
Well, I wouldn't go that far. But
listen.
what happened is that he underestimated, or his advisors
Was he
underestimated
playing
Romney.
a role? Was he paying rope to dope? I'm trying to find some excuse for this.
All presidents have threats, so don't even worry about
We
that.
don't
But
know
I
all the
can't
details.
understand.
Everything from his anniversary to what was going on in world affairs at the time. He
The
has
altitude, he was in Denver, a mile
well,
high.
but one of the realistic things is that the president did not have 3 weeks to sit back and plan for the debate
was too
because he
busy
has
doing
world matters that he has to deal with.
He was just looking presidential.
Romney, on the other
Listening to
hand,
his fool lie through his teeth, knowing that everybody would see through the lie.
You see, but you don't need three
nobody
three
called
weeks
Romney
of
on his lies.
preparation.
That's the other thing. Nobody called, and that was one of the surprising things about Obama. For whatever reason, he did not call Romney on his lies and misstatements.
didn't he?
We don't know the reasons for that, and the
Why can't he
planners,
explain
the
it?
handlers of Obama, I guess their challenge is to make sure that that's dealt dealt with tomorrow with the vice presidential debate as well as thereafter. Because everything from the attack on public television, which a lot of Americans are going to understand how that impacts them once they understand that the voice of freedom and the voice of free thinking sometimes is only represented by public television. That's part of what, you know, we have to understand how that will be dealt with in the future.
You talk to rich people and they say PBS is getting $450 million a year and they should commercialize it, put commercials on it.
But that money, again, the lie is that that money that goes to PBS is money that's poured down the drain. That money that's going to PBS is the money that helps educate some of our children at home who don't have preschool, who don't have kindergarten. That money that goes to PBS is the money that goes to independent journalists that allows a point of view to be presented in America where no other station would prevent it. That money that goes to PBS is money that allows people who ordinarily would not have access to the public ear to be able to speak points of view that are significant but are beaten down by the corporate interests.
If you truly had a Bill of Rights in this country, you wouldn't need PBS.
Well,
if you truly had the freedom of the press, you wouldn't need all these auxiliary groups feeding it, trying to feed information over against mass media.
That's
because they know television programming is geared for a 13-year-old. That's the intellectual level of television.
The 13-year-old who is a sucker to buy whatever's put in front of him. That's the average viewer.
If it wasn't for PBS and places like public access, we wouldn't be sitting here.
True. But
you'll never hear that. You'll never hear Romney make that kind of admission.
Well, and look what we put out there. We put the truth.
What
we're not controlled by commercialization.
This is priceless. The opportunity for varied voices, everybody from the Professor Gimmies to the people who are involved in fighting for the children, the way that Woody Henderson does. I mean, all of those voices would not be heard on commercial television.
That's right.
And that's part of the value. And it's easy to make a gimmickry and a joke about Big Bird, but we need to make sure those voices continue to be heard on places like this. And that's part of the reason why it would make a good target for Romney to say, well, we're wasting money on public television. It's public television. It's the voices of the public, not the voices of the corporate interests.
He would have all the television stations be a Fox. Right. Fox News. Fox, I mean, you see Fox all around the world. It's amazing.
They can buy
all CNN.
All the antennas and airtime all over the world. They can buy airtime.
I mean, it's crazy.
If they want to convince the Italians that the American government is going to save their industry, places like Fox is the mouthpiece for certain corporations to do that. And they have the money that they can do that. They can reach into parts of the Soviet Union, into parts of China in ways that we can't. And they serve their purpose. We have to make sure that the integrity of public television, the integrity of cable television, allows voices like ours to be heard against the billionaires on the other side with the huge megaphones. When we talk about the need for our people to have education, when we talk about the fight for child care in our community, when we talk about access to the vote, when we talk about the housing, the predicament in New York City, this is part of why we need to have voices on public television, on cable television. This is, and I commend you again and again. What we do here is priceless and invaluable to us, to our children, and to our children's children. And that's part of the reason that people like Romney would love to say, shut them down.
All right, you know what we're going to do? I want to get local about what's happening in our city here and go to the latest shooting. I had this old thing with Diallo, but we're not going to run that Diallo piece. We don't have enough time. We've already, in case you didn't show up, I was going to run Diallo, an old one. But we're going to go to Palenko, which is on Bev's tape, okay? So we'll drop that Diallo thing and go to Palenko. This is at National Action Network last Saturday.
You were there for me, and I made it. Let me say, first of all, let me thank all of you that came this morning for our birthday celebration. But on Thursday morning, around 5 in the morning, a young man who would have been 23 next month, driving down the Grand Central Parkway. Young man, never been in trouble, was a reservist in the armed services, signed up to serve and defend the country. His dream was to be a policeman. His father had to bury in July. Grandfather buried earlier this year. All he wanted to do was help his mother. Worked 2 jobs, one of them in the wee hours of the morning. Went around 2 unmarked cars, didn't know they were policemen. And the policeman came and fired 1 bullet into the car from the passenger side and took this young man's life. Sometime Thursday afternoon, a friend of the family called us, said, I know it's Reverend Sharpton's birthday, but did he know about what happened? And when I heard what happened and reached back to the member of the family, and the lawyers talked with the mother said, Reverend, I lost my husband in July, and I lost my father. She said, the only male I had left was my son. She said, it's going to hurt me, but I got to stand up for justice. And I told her, with all your pain and all you've lost, if you can come to the house of justice, we can certainly stop the birthday celebration to let the world know that we're going to stand for justice for her and her son. Noah Polanco could have been our son. This is not about race. This is not about who and what you are. This is about what is right and what is fair for everybody. The pain this mother's going through. Ramallah Graham's parents are here. Mother that had to bury her son, killed by a police cruiser in Brooklyn, and they sent her the bill for the cruiser. She's here. Taman Robinson. They all stood in the back telling her that we've got to stand together. They're not anti-police. We're not anti-police. Her son wanted to be a policeman. We're anti-wrong. And for unarmed, innocent people to be killed is wrong, and it's got to stop. Policemen have dangerous jobs, but they cannot become and not be allowed to become the judge and the jury and the executioner at any scene. Danger does not give them that right. This is an absolute outrage. This is something that we should in no shape or manner not stand with this family. We as a city and a nation, let me tell you, it's bad for a mother to have to bury her father. I buried my mother in March. It's a painful thing. It's bad for a wife to have to bury her husband. But it's unthinkable for a mother to have to bury her child. Her child's supposed to be able to bury her. and then to bury them because those that should be protecting you are the ones that do it, this mother will not have to stand by herself. People in his unit have said they'll be there. His friends and family, there are many of them here. I want them all to know that we're going to stand with them, and we're going to stand with her across boundaries of race and color and boroughs. We're all coming together to demand justice for Noel Polanco. We are all coming with you. They have to plan services and where they're going. But let me tell you that there must be a real review of training in this city. And there must be a fair and immediate investigation and moving forward. And we're going to be with this family every step of the way, just like we've stood with families before, including Tamon's parents and Ramali Graham's parents who are here. If we get involved, we there to the end. And we gonna win. The police that sodomized Abner Louima is just about finished breakfast in jail this morning. We don't stop until it's over. And we are not saying all police are bad. We're not even saying most are bad. But those that are wrong, it's just like those that are wrong in our community. We don't try to cover for those that are wrong in our community and don't cover for those that are wrong on the police force. Sister Sekou and others, we believe in getting rid of the bad apples in our community. You got to deal with these bad apples in the police department. And let me really be real clear. It undermines other police when you try to excuse behavior by police that go over the line. And lastly, we are not going for you trying to dig up and demonize this young man. They're going to try to discredit him. They're going to try to make him something that he wasn't. This is a young man who was a reservist. It's a young man working to help take care of his mama, who was a recent widow. They're going to try to make him look like he did something wrong. They're going to try to discredit the witnesses. Let me tell you something. We are not stupid. There is no reason to shoot an unarmed man driving down the highway. I don't care what you make up. You can't make that right.
Wow.
Powerful.
Again,
so here we go again.
We have a young man who's dead. We have police who are going to try to convince us that this young man who was a reservist, this young man who had ambitions of being a police officer, that this young man who's in a car with 4 of his friends is going to jeopardize
and a police
all
officer
of that.
In the car.
One of his friends was a woman police officer in the back seat. They said she was asleep at the time. And all of that he's going to jeopardize because of a traffic stop. Now, what we don't hear...
No, it's road rage.
Well, part of what we don't hear is that the 2 carloads of police officers who were either trying to force him off the road or get past him or in some way trying to intimidate him so he'd be out of the way so that they can get to where they were going, those 2 carloads of police officers, we are going to be asked to believe that they were in pursuit of doing their duty, and that was the reason that they were justified in killing this young man. Now, we can only believe so much. I mean, if you tell me he was somebody who was, I don't know, unemployed and he was trying to make a run for it, if you tell me that he's somebody who was all alone in a dark night,
right.
but to have me believe all of those lies, this time we have to back up. Say, wait a minute now. That can't all be true. This man is not a villain. He was there with his friends. He was a reservist. One of his friends was a police officer who was asleep in the back. The police officers who were involved in the shooting, we need to find out about them. Were they sober? Were they on duty?
There you go.
Where were they in a hurry to get to at that time? Was it something that required them to use lights and sirens and to move at full speed? We have to ask some serious questions in pursuit of justice.
This happened before, back in the early 80s in the Bronx. Some detectives, same thing, a motorist is trying to get around and get by. Two detectives pull a car over, shot a guy named Tommy Johnson, who was one of my co-workers. He was a transit police officer.
Ah, okay.
Shot him through the neck and killed him. And it was the cop on the passenger side that shot Tommy. It wasn't the cop by the window. Then when they found out that Tommy was a police officer, they fired his gun twice.
Really?
Made up a story. And the commissioner at that time, I can't remember who the commissioner was, but they said, well, your guy is going to have to take the fall to protect NYPD's personnel.
Whoa.
So the question was, well, what was his record? See,
this is internal now.
Yeah.
Police among police.
Yeah, Tommy Johnson was off duty.
Okay.
The two detectives were transporting a witness. When you're transporting a witness or a prisoner, you don't get involved in jack.
Right.
Because you put the civilian that's with you in jeopardy.
Okay.
If anything should happen.
Right.
Robert Venable was killed on Pitkin Avenue in Brooklyn years ago. He was cut in half by an Uzi. He and a sergeant were transporting a prisoner, and the ignorant sergeant pulled over as some guys were calling them, talking about a guy did something over there, but it was a drug deal that went bad. You don't pull your car over when you're transporting prisoners, witnesses, or anything like that, but this was not the case here. This young man, and again, there was a passenger in the passenger seat. And this cop or this detective fired across that passenger to shoot him. Now, one thing we got to look at is the fact that everybody says, I thought. I thought he had a gun. I was afraid for my life. These are not justifiable reasons for shooting people, and we need to have our legislators change the law.
Okay. It's not poor training.
It's not poor training. Okay. They don't need to be retrained.
Okay.
They don't need to be retrained.
That's what we hear all the time.
It's not about the training.
I doubt that anybody trained him to shoot past the passenger, to shoot at the driver when there was another police officer at the driver's side. I doubt that anybody would have trained him.
When Desmond Robinson was shot, one of the cops said he did not fire because there were passengers in his line of fire. Okay. He knew better than to fire.
Not to fire.
Okay?
There's somebody between you and who you're aiming at, that's reason enough not to fire.
This shooting, and I'm going to say something else. Having worked with the Bell family, specifically because I'm going towards D.A. Brown's office with this next comment.
Right.
We told Mr. and Mrs. Bell, forget it.
Because you're in Queens.
They were not ardently preparing a case against those cops in that shooting. We sat in that trial, and there was a guy that had a degree in English or something like that, who went back and got some type of certificate or something in crime scene reconstruction, and he's sitting on the witness stand talking a lot of junk, just like the guy down there that's debating the President of the United States. Now I'm sitting there, and the D.A. Brown's people failed to cross-examine this man, failed to challenge what he was saying, didn't prepare anything to refute the crap that he was putting out. I tapped one of the ADAs. I said, come with me. We stepped out of the courtroom. I handed her a list of about 8 questions to ask that witness. He said that a lampshade could not stop a 9mm bullet. A lampshade can stop a 9mm bullet. It can, and it did in that shooting.
Oh, that was the one in someone's house?
It went through the window and struck the lampshade. Right. Yes, a lampshade can stop a bullet. If it's hit at the right angle, the metal frame of the lampshade will, if the bullet hits it, it'll cause the bullet to move out of its line of trajectory into a circular orbit, because the lampshade is on a pin, and the lampshade will spin.
Sounds like a movie.
Okay, it's not a movie. It's real. But they did not prepare any cross-examination. D.A. Brown's office let that case collapse. And here we have another case coming up in Queens. I also want to get to Kenneth Boss. I was out of town last week too.
Wow.
Kenneth Boss. They want to give this guy back his gun. Now,
Diallo.
Kenneth Boss. Commissioner Kelly, you were not commissioner when Kenneth Boss committed his first homicide. His first homicide was in
Brooklyn,
1999 on Sheffield Avenue in the 75th precinct, where he shot Patrick Bailey to death, shot him in the back. And I confronted Howard Safer on this issue. Number one, following that shooting, there was no grand jury presentation or investigation into that shooting by Kenneth Boss. The Brooklyn District Attorney, Charles Hines, told his bureau chief to put that case on a back burner. And it was on a back burner for 15 months. And I know it was so because I had somebody I knew working in the Homicide Bureau who was an assistant district attorney.
Okay.
I went through all of the paperwork on the crime scene, all of the reports. I examined the crime scene photos, the autopsy report. Patrick Bailey was shot in the back. Kenneth Boss said they were at a Mexican standoff because Patrick Bailey was holding a shotgun to a young girl's head. Not so. Patrick Bailey had no shotgun. He had had a shotgun an hour and a half earlier when he used it to get some drug dealers
off the corner,
off the front of the house that his parents owned, and they were threatening the people that lived in the building.
And it didn't work.
And the shotgun was inoperable. The shotgun was in the basement of the building. 2 hours later, Patrick Bailey is coming from the supermarket, and the drug dealers see him, and they get some undercover cops and say, hey, that guy had a shotgun. He pulled a shotgun on us.
That's
He was coming from Pathmark.
Right.
So they chased him down the street, Patrick thinking he sees these white guys and the drug dealers chasing him. He takes off with his friends. They split up. Patrick and the young lady run into the building that his parents own. They come through the door. They shoot the young lady, and they shoot Patrick. The young lady caught a round in her hip. Patrick was shot in the back above his hip. The bullet struck his pelvic bone, traversed through, coming through the femoral artery of his right leg and his penis, and was lodged in the inside of his left thigh. And the only way that can happen as a bullet is exiting from the front of your body is that your leg is elevated. He was running. There was no Mexican standoff. Kenneth Boss was lying. So D.A. Hines protected Kenneth Boss. Then NYPD moves him from the 75th precinct to the street crime unit, where they said they ruled the night. And then he's working with 3 other cohorts.
Diallo.
And gunned down Diallo on the front steps, not in the vestibule, on the front steps, not knowing that they were being surveilled by federal agents because there was a clandestine meeting between Kenneth Boss and his partners and the occupants of a black Mercedes and a red Camaro. The black Mercedes had diplomatic plates, and the diplomatic car was being surveilled by federal agents. Now all of this, all of this was kept under wraps. I've known about it, and I've discussed it on other shows. But if Ray Kelly can give this man his gun again, he's as sick as anything.
Well, one of the things that
I got a rare treat for you. I think we have, 10 minutes, 15 minutes left?
18 minutes.
18 minutes? Let's run that piece on Diallo. I just want to reminisce for a minute. Just only 5 minutes long. And then we'll come back to this. I just want
it's
you to
not
see
ancient
yourself.
history because Mama Diallo was there a few days ago in terms of, again, fighting for justice. She understands that her son is like other sons who've been shot down by the police. So it's not ancient history.
That's right. They just had it. So let's roll in.
No, neither that or a lot of other things that should have come out in this trial.
Well, that was what Reverend Sharper was saying in opening piece, that why are these things able to come out in the trial?
Well, by law, you're not supposed to bring up the issue of a person's past.
But they're going to Amadou's past.
We got to look at this now.
Okay.
Yes, we have to look at this because the criminalization of the victim is a constant. The pre-criminalization of the suspect is a constant unless that suspect is a police officer. You can pick up the Daily News, the Times, the Post, Newsday in New York, any paper in New York.
Okay.
They will give you the person's past criminal history in the newspaper.
Okay.
Now, if you want to talk about polluting a jury pool, this is what the police department does on a daily basis relative to criminal cases.
Right.
So when a jury is pooled, you've already read something with regard to this defendant. Okay. You know how many times he's been arrested and whether or not he's been convicted of crimes before. You have all that information before you ever go to court. Now, if that is all right for the citizenry, then it ought to be all right for the police officer.
Okay.
What Burt Roberts did and the hundreds of thousands of dollars he was paid by the PBA to get the change of venue using a one-poll question, is it right to shoot an unarmed man in the doorway of his house, as that being the premise for them moving the case from the Bronx? No, not really. Not even to Albany County, because the demographics of Albany County do not match those of the Bronx. These officers, and in today's summation, defense counsel was calling them kids, these kids. Amadou Diallo posed a threat to these 4 white kids. That's the inference.
Yeah, oh yeah.
He referred to the officers as kids.
Family men.
Family men, but kids, kids. That tells you that these are not yet men, these are kids. These are boys who were in fear of their lives in a dangerous area of New York called the Bronx. And because one black man was standing in what they call a dimly lit doorway, they felt that they had to protect themselves and shoot this male. Problem: if the doorway was so dimly lit, how could you know whether or not he was pulling a wallet out of his pocket or a gun? If the doorway was so dimly lit, why would you even approach someone in that doorway when in fact you had flashlights which you never brought from your car to illuminate that dimly lit doorway? Fact: McMillan says that he backs out of the door while he's firing and continues firing as he's falling down the steps. No one in their right mind is going to fall backwards from a platform and not attempt to break their fall. There's no way in the world you could continue firing at somebody while you're falling backwards and not give consideration to striking your spine or your back on the pavement below. You would have to extend your arms to try and break your fall. That's nonsense. Amadou Diallo is portrayed here, and in the testimony that Sean Carroll gave last week, he said he's turning counterclockwise. Sean Carroll was in the right side of the door, so Sean Carroll could not see whether or not he had a gun, a wallet, or an empty hand.
Okay.
Secondly, if you are running up behind me and I'm trying to get in my house, what would be my natural response hearing steps, footsteps coming up suddenly behind me? Your natural response is to turn. That is your natural response. Sean Carroll also went on to say he took a crouched stance. Soon as I heard that, I said combatant situation. The targets that the police department uses are targets of a male in a crouched stance with his hand across his chest, his arm is extended in this manner. This is what they were inferring that Amadou Diallo did.
Okay.
This is what they're inferring, that he extended his arm in a crouched stance, and they automatically went into an attack mode. The verbiage used by Sean Carroll was all militaristic.
Okay.
He talked about the muster, the troops. Everything relative to his mindset is in the mindset of an occupying force.
Okay.
And you've really got to listen to the attorneys as they lay out their summation in this case. And the most revolting aspect of this case is that the district attorney has not done his job.
Okay. There we go. Back.
Well, the DA has another
That's 12
chance.
years ago, you know.
He's got another chance with the Ramali Graham shooting in the Bronx. You see, there is always an excuse for killing somebody wrongfully. So they think. There's always an excuse. The penal law says it is an affirmative defense. That means you cannot be charged with the crime of manslaughter in the second degree as a police officer if you were in fear for your life.
Well, okay. White minority New York lives in fear for their life. Therefore, they're consistently justified in using deadly force.
If you are in fear for your life, you do not need to be carrying a loaded firearm in this or any other city in this country.
So what's the excuse with Polanco?
I have no idea.
Where's the fear for your life?
You see, this is the thing.
I mean,
they're either going to say
he was reaching
bent down,
for a gun.
The young lady that was sitting next to him said his hands were on the steering wheel.
And why would he do a thing like that?
He had training now. He was interested in being a police officer, and he was trained as a reservist.
He knew what to do.
So this is a man, exactly,
he knew
who
exactly
knew about
what
keeping
to do.
your hands visible, no sudden moves.
Absolutely.
And again, you know, he was not by himself. So to think that this was a bunch of terrorists who were out to shoot and kill the cops, that kind of a headline doesn't belong in reality. That's fictional. He is somebody who had the ambition and the concern for himself and his friends that would not allow him to do that kind of crazy action. Now, what we don't do is we don't look often enough at the motive or the actions of the police. In New York City is still run as if it was a white majority city.
Yeah.
The NYPD still works in a way that protects white police officers to the detriment of the black community. What we have to deal with is that white police officers are an occupying force in our community. They still think that they are in charge of administering the law in our community, when in fact the people of New York, who are majority black, brown, and Asian, are the ones who are in charge of administering the law.
But keeping in mind, many black police officers are also an occupying force.
Well, we have to talk about that.
Right?
The black police officers have been trained to think white.
So let's not.
It's all about blue.
Let's not think white.
Yes.
Let's not think.
What
Let's get out of that
wall
mindset,
what kind of
because
wall?
that's the
blue
same
wall.
game they're playing. They've been playing for years.
Yeah.
The race card.
Yeah.
I was doing a session at a church in Queens a number of years ago. It was a men's meeting. So I called up a young fella, he's about 16. So I opened up my bag, I took out a gun belt, strapped a gun belt on him. Boom, boom, all the equipment. He changed, he morphed right in front of these men. This is a kid that grew up in the church.
Of course.
I said, how do you feel? He said, I got the power now, you know. He's slapping the gun. He said, I got the power, man.
Think of the white ethnic minorities who've had that for generations.
I said to these men, and these are all black men and boys, I said, what do you notice? And they noticed the change in him.
Sure.
I said, so this is one of your own who was raised here.
Right.
I strap a gun belt on him. He morphed right in front of your eyes. So it's not about whether the guy is white or black.
Right.
It's about what is inside that human being.
The God in
I said, because from what you saw, we don't ever want him
to put on a gun,
to put a badge and a gun on and walk the street, because his heart and his mind are not right.
Well, what do you suppose the video games do to our youth?
It desensitizes people,
right?
And it
not
comes
just
from the
our
top
youth.
down.
It desensitizes other people.
All male.
Smart bombs. You saw it with the war in Iraq. And they're
Right.
showing you how they're blowing up all these buildings like it was an arcade game.
Right.
Until
Exactly.
you have smelled death, until you have seen people dismembered, until you've looked at people taking their last breath and they look into your face.
Ooh.
And I've been there for that.
Yeah.
This is nothing that you want to see. And it's nothing that anybody should ever see.
It's demonic.
But we have desensitized death, killing, and murder. Whether it's the person, the hoodlum on the street, or the president of the United States dropping a bomb because he wants to get back at somebody. There is no respect for life.
And we have a few minutes to go. This was interesting, gentlemen. It was very interesting.
This is a story of life and death on the streets of New York that some of our young people particularly are not prepared for. because some of our young people, they face life and death decisions on the streets of New York every single day. Imagine being an 18-year-old young black man, 6'3", let's say, 250, 300 pounds, and you happen to, you walk, or you have a military gait to you. Just imagine, and I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of our young people. He becomes a target. He becomes someone who is very easily, without even turning his head, his size, his color, his demeanor, his clothing makes him a target for those who say we must get rid of them. Them. He and we are the them.
And with that, we'll have to say goodbye, gentlemen. The God in me loves the God in you, and stay tuned for more on the Gilchrist Experience. It's been an experience, which it will continue to be. It's called life. God bless.
The Oxford Union in England.
I read once, passingly, about a man named Shakespeare. I only read about him passingly, but I remember one thing he wrote that kind of moved me. He put it in the mouth of Hamlet, I think it was, who said, "To be or not to be." He was in doubt about something. Whether it was nobler in the mind of man to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, moderation, or to take up arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing, end them. And I go for that. If you take up arms, you'll end it. But if you sit around and wait for the one who's in power to make up his mind that he should end it, you'll be waiting a long time. And in my opinion, the young generation of whites, blacks, browns, whatever else there is, you're living at a time of extremism, a time of revolution, a time when there's got to be a change. People in power have misused it, and now there has to be a change, and a better world has to be built, and the only way it's going to be built is with extreme methods. And I, for one, will join in with anyone, don't care what color you are, as long as you want to change this miserable condition that exists on this earth. Thank you.